I'm not very good at editing, so whatever gets on film, that's what I'm
we can trim it for you.
No, don't do that.
You'll have to, because I just said a bad word.
So I wrote this one night, and it should be all right. We'll see how we go.
We'll definitely cut that from it.
All right.
All right.
Introduction.
Hi, my name's Abbott-Jard, and thanks so much for joining us for Lunch and Learn to talk about diversity in corporate culture. So the first thing to do is an acknowledgement of country. So I don't know if you've participated in one of these before, but this is where we acknowledge our ancestors and we recognise our language and our kinship groups. I'm a Kamilaroi woman, otherwise known as Kamilaroi, which is another pronunciation, and that is my First Nation. Here in Brisbane, I specifically acknowledge the Yagara and Turrbal people, their elders, past, present and emerging. And I thank them for their custodianship of the land and acknowledge with gratitude the privilege and wealth that I and my fellow citizens derive from this land. I acknowledge with regret the way in which these privileges were taken, and I commit to sharing my time, knowledge and culture to promote community healing and sharing of prosperity.
A question already.
Yes.
Is this like the actual formal acknowledgement of country?
Yes.
That's like an actual script that you would probably follow?
Yep.
Okay.
So this one I wrote specifically for today's presentation, but they do come in different forms, and you can, I used one to kick off procurement team strategy day in a previous organisation I worked in, and I talked about the economic benefits that we have from living in Australia. So there are different parts of our culture that we might want to share and talk about in an acknowledgement of country. When we talked a bit about welcome to country in a different forum, and welcome to country can only be performed by people actually from the land itself, so Yagara and Turrbal for this particular area. I'm from Quandamooka country, as in where I live is in Quandamooka, so Wynnum, so you would have a welcome to country done by the local Quandamooka group. The other thing is that welcome to country can, it's primarily reserved for the highest ranking member in the community. So if you have an elder or an auntie or an uncle or someone like that, you would ensure that they would step in and do the welcome to country and not yourself. So there you go, there's a little bit of background there. I don't know if everyone's familiar with this map, hopefully so, but it shows each colour is a different language group. So mine is down here, mine's down here. So you can see I've got many different groups that border mine, so many different colours. That's my language group, Kamilaroi. And this is the border of Queensland, New South Wales. And the best thing the point from this map is you can see how diverse our groups are, and how when we talk about policy and and law changes and constitutional recognition and land rights, it gets a little bit complicated because we've got different boundaries and so many different groups to please. So the other thing to pick up from this is you can see all the different colours that come along the border. I would have needed to have been fluent in each one of those languages in order to trade and continue the economy and how it needed to run. So trading, bartering, agreements on how we're going to use the land and look after it and things like that.
So when you say language, you mean a full actual
yeah, like you would have to be multilingual.
Right. Okay.
So
wow.
So many Aboriginal groups, even though we will have there's a Kamilaroi dictionary that's my language that's online, but I would have had to have been fluent in these languages as well. And you'll actually find that is still the case today in areas in the Northern Territory where they'll speak multiple languages because they still have their language, and also in the Torres Strait Islands. So you'll actually, there's a whole language that they've developed, which is a form of Pidgin English, which is how they communicate with Papua New Guinea and other countries. So we're quite multilingual and and diverse in terms of culture. That's going to take us way out of time. But that's cool. But I think that that's important because a lot of this stuff doesn't get taught in schools. And,
Yeah.
and also when we're talking about corporate culture, I think the really important thing to remember is to be curious and to ask questions, but figuring out how you can do that respectfully, which is something that probably takes a little bit of practice, and you're going to, sometimes have different responses. So this is a slide which it seems to be cutting out. Oh, here we go. Let's see if we can go back. And if it'll load properly. No.
That's
Okay.
funny.
Because I do, unfortunately. So what is that? An image or something?
It's like a link back to the start of the presentation.
Yeah. Let's see if I can. Because even when I was in the other view, I couldn't read it.
It's like in your actual presentation. If you maybe go end show and jump back into the slide, I'm thinking it's like a widget or something that's sitting on top of the
Just escape.
yeah, like the escape top left corner.
On your keyboard, yeah.
Okay.
There you go, you see it there.
So did I accidentally put
It looks like a screenshot.
There we go. Screenshot. Got it. Awesome.
Perfect.
Okay. Now, can I double click on this and it goes into slideshow?
We'll just press F5, it should launch.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
Okay. So what are the benefits? Why do we think about diversity in business? It actually, research shows it improves performance and productivity. It increases innovation and creative thinking. We all want that, right? And we're trying to create environments all the time. And sometimes it might be as simple as employing diverse people for diverse thought. It saves time and money in regards to staff retention and customer retention, and provides us, so when we provide flexibility for welcoming different groups, we have happier staff. When people amongst our staff can recognise other people from diverse backgrounds and sometimes of theirs, they feel like they're more a part of the environment, and they feel they have higher levels of engagement that get reported.
It's like that sense of community, right?
Yeah, that sense of community. And I think economically speaking, if your customers can identify with the organisation that they're doing business with as well, that helps you in terms of retaining customers who feel like, oh, you don't get me, you don't understand me.
Yeah.
I find it hard to relate.
Yeah.
It also reduces, so having an eye on diversity in your corporate culture reduces our risks in regards to legislative and regulatory requirements that we have as an employer. It's against the law to discriminate, so that has to be reflected in our policies and procedures, and it's kind of easier not to discriminate if a part of your group is actively recognised and respected because of the differences. It promotes staff health and well-being, and you get a wider range of talented staff. So a good example of that is, so when you get taught history in school, for example, when I was growing up, because the history that was taught to us was from one lens, from one perspective only, the conversations that I had in my family about Indigenous culture and what our history actually was and things like that, and was it an invasion? No, we actually existed. Okay, what does that mean? You know, things like that. You start to take information and you start to challenge it, and you start to think a little bit more critically about it. So that's where that diversity of thought comes in. It actually improves our competitiveness. So because we're all different and because we come from different places, we spend time on just figuring out what our shared vision and focus is as an organisation. And it's interesting, you'll see that large countries like America, for example, will spend quite a lot of time being very patriotic. And the point of it is, you've got millions and millions of people in this huge country. If you can give them one vision to identify with, they're going to move together as a group a little bit more holistically. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So sometimes the larger the country, the more patriotic it is.
Yes.
And the same with organisations and groups of people. And it's also with the government and also the world that we live in, so European unions, Australian government, whoever, it's being recognised as a core part of our responsibility as a corporate entity, that we have a sense of social responsibility and citizenship. So you'll see lots of things like, you know, understanding our supply chain and slavery within it, and, you know, the AMLs and the anti-money laundering, and challenging what our ethics are in terms of how we deal with people's money and how we're transparent in our transactions. So the ethics and things like that all relate. What does diversity look like? We should be reflective of the demographics of our community that we're in, as in the organisation and the demographics of the community. This one is a really interesting one that I found. This is actually from Stanwell, you know, our power providers here in Brisbane. And this is a chart that they came up with. They said, we understand that our community is made up of, you know, women and lots of different ethnic groups and things like that. We understand that our employees aren't representative of that graphic. So they deliberately said, when we go to hire people and when we write policy for diversity and inclusion, we are going to target some of these numbers and hopefully they reflect in our people. So the one I really liked was, or stood out for me, was this one here. We want 20% of people in the I generation born between 86 and 06. So that they recognise that that generation offers a few different things in the work environment. It's also reflective of the community, so they wanted to have that statistic there. So they will proactively go and try and recruit people in that area. 2% Indigenous people, 40% of women in senior leadership roles. So they probably had